All right, so thank you everybody online and in person for joining us for LSPUG. This is our last in-person meeting for the year. The rest will be remote. So thank you for both sides being here today. We have Jonathan Weaver from Kansas City. He's one of the organizers for SharePoint Saturday Kansas City, one of the organizers for the Kansas City O365 user group, and speaks at a lot of events. And today he's going to give us an introduction to Microsoft Flow for non-developers. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to him.
Unmute. All right. Hi, everybody. Nate, how do I get this screen off of my...
A little orange arrow at the top.
There it is. Thank you. All right. Back. I'm Jonathan Weaver. I'm here because I signed up, and that's why I get to speak, and you don't. Can you see my screen, first of all? Excellent. All right, so right there at the top, there's my email address, my Twitter handle, my blog. Feel free to email me, tweet me, follow me, read the blog. There are things out there. They're not from this month or last month, but they're out there. Eventually, there will be more. I'm a SharePoint consultant. I'm a solution architect. When I say solution architect, please don't ask me about servers. Tell me you've got a form that you need fixed or a form that you need put into electronic form, and I will figure out how to make that work for you. I've been in IT for over 20 years, started at Gateway 2000 in tech support with the cow boxes. Went to dev, realized I liked making things but hated writing code. Then I found out that QA was an actual job. You know, every kid dreams of testing video games for a living, right? So I got to do that. It wasn't video games, it was insurance software. Not nearly as glamorous as the video games. I've been a BA, and then at some point my wife dragged me kicking and screaming into this SharePoint world. She said something like, you already do workflows and you already do diagrams and business processes and forms and all of that in your QA job, so you should be fine in SharePoint. And after about a year and a half, I figured out that she was right. So I do logic puzzles. I'm a forms and process guy. Workflows are my bread and butter. When it comes to the actual documents, I could care less. But if you want them to be approved by somebody, that's me. I'm there. So what is Flow? Microsoft Flow. This is a wording straight off of Microsoft's website. I'm not going to bore you with the actual words, but basically, if you need things to do other things and then maybe kick out something at the end, Flow can do that for you, probably, depending on exactly what it was you needed. So we're going to replace repetitive tasks, manual tasks, running paper from one desk to another desk. And we're going to do that by connecting services and logic together. Flow can handle conditional logic. It's kind of what it does. That's the reality of why people use Flow. And Microsoft has built in a bunch of templates for us to give us starting points. Emphasis on starting points. Yes, they are functional, but no, they are not final products. Or you can build it straight from scratch because you know better than Microsoft what you want. Microsoft is guessing. So down on the lower, or up on the top right, you can see the logo for Flow. It's the little purple box with the two squares connected to each other. It's connecting services in a flow. It's amazing how they figured that out. At the lower right, you can see a real simple, basic Flow example. Get tweets from Twitter and send me a notification. We get stuff, we do something with it, and you get something at the end. Cool? Also, at any time, feel free to jump in with questions. Like, for example, on this slide, you might notice there's a logo at the bottom that is not mine. I stole a whole pile of these slides from Critical Path Training, but to be fair, I didn't steal it because in the video where he said, Here's the link to the slides. Feel free to use the slides for any of your user groups. This is a user group. Thank you, Ted Pattison. So you'll notice this logo on a few of the next few slides because he put them way better than I could. So what are the building blocks of flow? We start with a trigger. A trigger is something happens. Then we have an action. Because something happened, we need to do something. And to do something, we may need to attach to services. And those are places where we either get or give data, or both. And then we have connectors. Connectors are the developer-y part. We don't have to know how those work. The title of this presentation is Microsoft Flow for Non-Developers. The connectors are the magic part. It's the magic part. There's phrases like APIs and other stuff that I don't use, other words I don't use because that's for developers. I also make fun of developers a lot in my sessions, so if you're offended by that, tough, I'm the one speaking. So you can see at the bottom, this is a real basic flow. It's a flow of a flow. So you can see on the left, you've got the orange box, which is the web APIs. That's the connectors. It connects your services. The middle is an actual screenshot of a flow. Inside of that, the first thing is a trigger, then a bunch of stuff in the middle is all of your actions. And then at the very end, there's a create file. I don't expect you to be able to read it because I know it's really small. And then coming out, we have a SharePoint list at the end, and there's another connector there. So any questions on building blocks? We're going to get into what they actually do and how to use them later. All right, so the trigger types. So we start with a trigger. This is something happens. So in your regular everyday life, you want to get a training class. So you print out a form, you write a bunch of words on it, and you go hand it to your manager. Well, the trigger there was you handed it to your manager. Well, the trigger was that you wanted to go to a training class, and so you filled out a form. Now the actions are all of the things that happen after you fill out the form. So the types of triggers for flow are scheduled flow triggers, which are your timer jobs. Automated flow triggers, which are those automagical things that just happen in the background. Someone dropped a document into a SharePoint library, or someone tweeted with a specific word or phrase. And so it's just out there listening. When something happens, it will start. On-demand flow triggers, these are more like your buttons, your manual starts. And then you move on to actions. So you have 3 different main types of actions. Let's get them all on the screen. So we have controls, which are more like your conditions, your do whiles. It's the stuff that feels more programmery. It's the logic that happens. And then you have variables. Variables store data. They store information while you're manipulating the data, while you're doing your actions and your steps within the workflow. They could be like adding fields together. They could be doing calculations on dates to make sure if we're within a certain number of days of an event, then do something. And then you have your data operations. These are the more advanced. These are your joins and your arrays. And if you really want to write script, there's a JSON thing in this one. We're not going to talk about that one. To me, that's developer-y. To the developers, I'm a wuss. So we all have our perspectives. I'm right. So data automatically flows from step to step. You can't use data that you haven't processed yet. Make sense? If I haven't handed it to my boss yet, my boss can't approve it because my boss doesn't have the piece of paper. So this is an example. Looks like a file was probably dropped in Dropbox or Box or something. And so the trigger was that the file was put in there. the outputs of that trigger are you now have a file name, you have file size, file content. There's probably other things, other metadata, created by, you got name in there, might have title. You might have, if it's a SharePoint list, you'll have things like business unit and, whatever other data, owner. Once you've had that trigger, you now have these outputs that you can use in your first action. So those outputs become the inputs to the first action. Okay, makes sense? Once I've handed the piece of paper to my boss can now look at the piece of paper, decide whether or not I get this training and approve it. And then the output of that approval will be that she hands it to the director to approve or to HR to approve. So now that we've had another action, we have additional outputs. So my boss's approval, and maybe my boss puts in the cost center because someone has to pay for it. So those are additional outputs that come from the first action. Now the next action, which is my director or HR, whoever's after my boss, will receive it. They'll have all of the information, all the outputs from the first trigger and the outputs from the action. So those all become available. So this is that downstream. Once you've done a trigger or an action, you can now use those outputs for the next one. So cool. Questions? Self-explanatory. It's kind of like a waterfall. You can't take the water from the bottom and put it at the top.
Are there ever some of those metadata things that wouldn't be able to be used, like certain field types or anything?
This is a Microsoft product, so almost definitely. And it's the one you want. That's the one that you can't use, yes. No, I mean, to be fair, that is a very generic question that requires specific answers. So based on your specific use case, there may be, the different triggers or the different actions will have different sets of outputs, some of which may or may not work for the next specific action that you're doing.
Gotcha.
This is weird. By this slide, I've usually told at least 6 jokes. I think I'm only at 1 so far, so we're gonna have to catch up during demo. So buttons, these are the instant start flows. These are my favorite part. I have an entire session called Fun with Microsoft Flow Buttons, where we'll do an entire hour just on buttons. So, probably can't read those. So I'm gonna zoom in. I'm going to not zoom in because I'm in presentation mode. That's kind of weird. I will make this zoom in. All right, we don't get any zooming right now.
Down at the bottom on the right, you can actually click the zoom button.
Yeah, probably. So, have you ever been on a bad date and you forgot to call, or you have your friend call you at a certain time to give you an excuse to get out of said date? I'm in a room full of nerds. What am I talking about? Me neither. Flow has a button for you. So you forgot to have the friend call you. So instead, you have this button that you set up on your phone. You subtly reach down under the table, push the button, set your phone on the table. And then in 1 minute, it pops up an alert that says, hey, your house is on fire. You need to leave now. So you show it to the bad date, you run out the door, right?
This is a personal experience, right?
Absolutely not. I've been married for 27 years. Okay, so here's a more realistic one. You ever left your spouse sitting at home watching a sports ball game while babysitting the baby? Push the button on his phone before you leave. You leave the house. In 30 minutes, the button, it pops up on his phone and says, hey, pause the sports ball game, check the baby's diaper, and push the button again. So it's like a 30-minute snooze, right? Anyways, so those are my fun buttons for, everyday life, not necessarily for work. I suggest not using these to get out of meetings with your boss, though they do work. That is from personal experience. So these buttons, you can see in the middle the templates, which we'll talk about templates here in a minute. And the template at the top left is send myself a reminder in 10 minutes. That's what I use to make my buttons. These are the manual start triggers. You click it, technically it's a fully functional flow at that point. I mean, it's going to pop up and say, hey, here's your reminder for 10 minutes. That's all it's going to do. But once you've got the template, once you've got the flows created, then you go in and you modify it. You say, oh, I want it in 5 minutes or 30 minutes, and I want it to say these things. And then after that, you can manipulate it as far as you can any other flow. And we'll look at that here in a moment. Putting in a form when you push the button, having a form to collect is a wonderful thing. And these are so easy to make. You can see the flow on the right. There's my house on fire flow. That's the entire flow. That's it. That's the whole thing. Looks really, really difficult, right? All right. So at this point, we're going to talk about the most difficult part of flow. Does anybody know what the most difficult part of flow is who hasn't already seen this presentation? All right. The hardest part of Microsoft Flow. Knowing what you want. Once you know what you want, putting it into flow is a lot less difficult. It's not hard, but figuring out what you want, that's the difficult part. We have another presentation we do called Automation Doesn't Fix Broken Processes. Just because your process is A, B, C, D doesn't mean that's a good process. But once you've defined what the process is, then you can lay it out in flow. And it's just a step-by-step, maybe some branching, and it works. And it's easy enough. On the drive down from Kansas City to Branson, I thought, I'm not good at remembering people's names. So on my iPhone 6, not even one of the big ones, just an iPhone 6, I created a button, I created a form, I added a photo field on it, and the form collected their name, their contact information, saved it out to a SharePoint list. It worked amazingly. And I have a manual button, a flick button that I set up to work with my camera. So I don't even have to hold the camera up and try and push the button while making a smile, because those don't work well for me. So I got there, it worked amazingly. Downfall, about 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, couldn't fall back asleep. So I'm like, let's update the flow. It didn't work again after that one. So moral of the story, don't update your flow at 3 o'clock in the morning. Any questions about updating flows at 3 o'clock in the morning? No? Okay, excellent. See, I'm trying to catch up on my jokes. All right, any questions about the instant start buttons? We'll actually make one here in a minute.
Are there limitations in platform, like does it work on all devices?
So they work best on your phone or in the app. Wherever you have the app, there's a button. So you can see in the first screen here. This is an actual screenshot from my phone. So in the Flow app, there's a buttons button. And it pulls it, and these are actually what the buttons look like in the app. They're just those circles with the title on them. All right, which brings me to the most important part of a flow. Does anyone know what the most important part of a Microsoft Flow is? Title your flow. Please title your flow, or you end up with 10 buttons that are all called send myself a reminder in 10 minutes. Now, when you want to try and fix one of them, you got to go through each of them until you find the right one. Title your flow. So recap, hardest part of flow, figuring out what you want. Most important part of flow, titling your flow. All right, everyone caught up? Everyone wrote that down? Okay, close enough. All right, I was probably talking about something and interrupted myself, but that's all right. We're gonna go to demos. And there's my information again. Feel free to screenshot that real quick. And done. Okay, you can still do it right now. All right. Now, this needs to go away. All right, so we are going to.
We got a question now.
Oh, awesome, I like questions. I got an answer.
Okay. Oh, there was a question. So the one about the platforms, could you repeat that for the microphone?
I don't even know where the microphone is. It's not in the keyboard. Yeah, so as far as platform goes, wherever you have the Microsoft Flow app, you can use the buttons, you can edit your flows. Obviously, the bigger the screen, the easier it is to do. But the question that I usually get around that is, can I create the button and then go drop that button on a page? And the current answer is no, but feel free to jump out to user voice and vote for that option, because that would be really cool to do. You can trigger a flow from a Power App, but that's not the same as being able to drop it in like a SharePoint page or an HTML page.
So it
Cool.
works on any type of device, like iOS, Android?
I believe that is
If there's an
correct.
app?
If there's an app, if you have a Microsoft Flow app, it should work for you. All right, so Microsoft Flow is available through your Office 365 app launcher. It's called Microsoft Flow. All right, so this is the welcome page. Let's see if that's better. All right, this is the welcome page, or the home page. It has basic information. It has some jumping off points. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. Feel free to read it. There's lots of words, lots of pictures, and there's some of the basic templates that you can jump straight into creating flow right from this page. And there's also some learning information. So walking down the left column, the left navigation, we've got approvals, which,
On the browser?
let's see. Oh, I can. Just not in the PowerPoint. All right. Is that better? More visible? All right, so we've got the approvals page. This is an amazing, amazing page for directors and C-levels, because they are forever losing the emails with the approvals, or in SharePoint on-prem in 2010, 2013, the email just has an open this link button or open the task button in it, and they can't find it because it's, you know, at the top of the page. So I've created multiple dashboards, multiple approval task dashboards that just are roll-ups of all of their approval task pages that are narrowed down to their My Tasks. So in Microsoft Flow, the approval email actually has the approve and reject buttons in the email, which, first of all, that's amazing, because that means that the directors and C-levels don't have to go find the task. It's just right there in the email on their phone. They look at the email, they click approve, and they're good. If they lose the emails, they can come here, and I probably should have seeded this with some approvals, but they can see a list of the emails or the approvals that they've received that they need to act on right here. And if they have created approvals, they'll see them under sent. And then if they aren't sure, they can look right here under history, and they can see all of their approvals, and they can sort and filter. They can look at their requester. Their sorts and filters are not wanting to happen. Okay, maybe they took that out. But you also have your outcomes, so you can look at which ones did you cancel, which ones did you approve or reject, or if you've added some other option into the approval task, it'll all be right here. I love this because I don't have to build dashboards for them, and this is going across Flow, which means it's going across all of the site collections in SharePoint. But also, if you have flows that are connecting other things that aren't SharePoint, that happens to be the thing that I use use Flow for most. But if there's other processes, if there's things like Box or Dropbox that your company uses, or if they're stressed about, you know, anytime Twitter someone uses the hashtag or the app for their company, and they want to see those flows, or maybe there's approvals around that, they can see them all in one place, and you don't have to build a dashboard for it because it's there. My flows, that's where your flows are. We'll come back to those and create. So templates, skipping down to templates, let's zoom back in. So this is where the magic starts. This is also the feedback I got from a couple of these intro sessions, was that I already knew which template I wanted to use, and so I jumped right on into the template and I didn't explain how to find the right template. So, explanation of how to find the right template. You have a search at the top. If you know what you want to do, which again is your first thing you need to know, I want to get things from Twitter into SharePoint. You can use search to say Twitter. So now all of the templates that are listed on this page should have Twitter in them somewhere. If you know that you want to do an approval around Twitter, you can further narrow it. They're refiners, just like in everything. If you can shop in Amazon, you can find a template, assuming there is one. There's your buttons. Let's take Twitter out of the search. So here's your buttons. Your instance starts. Send myself a reminder in 10 minutes right there. It's my favorite one. You can get your today's weather forecast so that you don't have to ask Siri or Amazon or Echo or Alexa or Google or whichever device you have. In addition to the search, maybe you just want to look around. Obviously, you can just scroll through the all flows. You can sort by name. You can sort by published time. Haven't figured out the use case for this because Microsoft publishes these. So, I mean, maybe you just want to know which ones are newest, I guess. Another big thing I will point out later when I'm in a different screen. So we'll skip that for the moment because I'm not on that screen. So again, it's refiners. If you know what you need, if you know what you want, then the refiners work. I want an email and an approval. So I get email and approval. And you might notice there's a bunch of little icons, all these little colors and pictures and all of that. What are those? I'm glad you asked. Let's go down to connectors. So the same concept applies here. We've got a search. We've got 284 connectors or some weird number like that. They add several every month. And you can search. Every connector has a different icon. I will very specifically point out OneDrive for Business is that one. OneDrive not for business is that one. They are different. The hue of the blue is different. Also, the cloud's just a little different. The title is different. The functionality is very different. Don't use the wrong one. If you use the wrong one, it won't work. But again, my point is all of the connectors have different icons. So theoretically, you can tell what they are by the icon. Some of them are more obvious. Power BI, OneNote.
I noticed that they're not all Microsoft.
What? They're not all Microsoft. In fact, if you scroll down to the G's, I'm going to break your eyes for a moment. If you scroll down to the G's, you'll notice Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Drive, Google Tasks, Google Sheets. So yes, Microsoft understands that some of us use Google, and Microsoft is working with us. Also, you might notice some of these have a little green box that says premium. Those are premium. They cost extra. If you haven't paid for premium, you can't use those. Flick.
Is premium a flow licensing, or is it for just that connector?
That's an excellent question. And if you show up to the next Power Apps and Flow user group in Kansas City, which is at some undetermined date in the near future, we'll be able to go over that question. If you were at the last one, you could have asked it to the actual licensing person. Flick, that's the buttons. The buttons are nice. So fun story, the guy who runs the Kansas City Power Apps and Flow user group, he has one of these Flick buttons stuck on his dashboard in the car, and it runs flows. And so when he single clicks it, it texts his wife, I'm on my way. If he double clicks it, it texts his wife, I'm running late. And if he holds it, it texts his wife, call me. So that he doesn't have to mess with his phone while he's driving. Yeah, that's this Flick, the one that's on the screen right now. It has its own app. It's got its own phone app, and then you connect it to your flows. It's a lot of fun. They do cost money. Those are also, the app is not premium, but the buttons are.
And they're very small and easily lost.
Yes.
Experience there.
Yes, in Branson, I lost one. I lost the white one.
Oh.
I was using it for my camera, and I had it, they come with these little belt clips, which doesn't work so well when you sit down to eat. And then they fall on the floor, and they're white, and it's dark, and it's a nightclub, and it looks like a piece of ice, and it gets swept up, and nobody finds it. Is a story I read on the internet. All right. We're going to skip data and AI Builder. AI Builder is brand new. I haven't even looked at it yet. Haven't even clicked the button yet. Learn.
So
check that out.
That lives, got another question online.
Oh, awesome.
Melissa's wondering, is there a reason an IT department would restrict access to flows? Is there a governance best practice recommendation? Based on her Microsoft reading, the point of having the flow is to make tools more efficient and easy for all to use.
Okay,
So,
my first question back, that's not Melissa Hubbard, is it?
Schultz.
Okay, I'm just making sure. Since she's a flow MVP. Thought maybe it was a trick question. So yes, IT can use data prevention policies to restrict which services you can use. The reason to do that is because we don't want our data going out to these other services. Or it could simply be that someone in IT is paranoid that you're going to actually use it and they won't have control over it. But primarily, yes, you can specify in the Flow admin panel, these users are allowed to use these connectors, and nobody else can use anything, and those users can't use any additional connectors. So if your company, say, is a heavy Box user and a SharePoint user, then they might say you can use the Office 365 suite, of Flow connectors and Box, but not GitHub and not Dropbox and not Google Sheets and not Twitter and not all of the rest of them. So yes, that is a thing.
I think there's some licensing, like you can get a higher Flow license to hit some of those premium services. So you have different levels.
Right, for the premiums. Yeah. I assume that it's a licensing. Once you hit the higher license, there's the Flow premium license or something like that.
2, 1, whatever.
Yeah, Power Apps has one.
Yeah.
Dynamics has one. Yeah, I mean, it's Microsoft. They don't make software, they make licensing. That's what their primary product is. And then they give you stuff for free. And then they say, you can use it fully for the next 90 days, and then we're going to start charging you for everything you do. Also, in that same vein, you do have a limit to how many flows you can run per month. But we explicitly asked the question, I feel like it's 10,000 per user, but it is a pool. Yeah, pool. Thank you. Yes, it's pooled. So if you have 100 users, then that's, I lost count, 1 million flows. But I could run 30,000 and someone else runs 8, and that's okay. So the pooled resources are. So clicking on Learn brings you over to docs.microsoft.com. These are some great little exercises based on the level that you feel you are. Well, they're based on the level they feel you are, but then you can select the different ones to do. And these are just basic to-dos, how-tos. and they'll run you through based on, obviously you're going to be limited based on what you have access to, and learn to use REST APIs. That's not in the non-developer track. Let's go back to the right tab. Thank you. All right, so now the meat and potatoes. Got 25 minutes. We're good, 20 minutes. All right, so in the My Flows, this is where you see your flows. Intuitive, right? It's like they named things appropriately. So I can see a list of flows that I've made. I can see team flows, which used to be called flows that are shared with you. These are flows that other people made and shared them with you. And then you have business process flows, which are much bigger. We're not going to talk about those today. Now, the second most important part of any flow, when you hover over them, you get these little icons and dots, and Microsoft's really good at the 3 dots thing, right? If you're done with a flow and you don't want it to run anymore, click this turn off button. This is another personal experience. First time I demoed Flow was in 2016, about a month before the presidential election. So I thought, what am I going to do to make sure that there's stuff in there? So I said, let's get tweets that have hashtag Trump or hashtag Hillary. Sure enough, I set it, I started it, it filled up my SharePoint list. The demo was amazing. And then 3 weeks later, when I went to demo it again, I had 22,000 items in my SharePoint list because I didn't turn off the flow. So, second most important thing in Flow, turn it off when you're not using it, when you don't want it to run, especially if it's automatic run things. So that's the My Flows. All right. So from here, you can create, edit, share, and save. You can run the flow from here. You can edit the flow. You can share the flow. You can save a copy. You can export a flow, which is really cool. So when it's broken and you can't figure it out, but you have a friend who's a flow MVP, you can zip it up, send it on over. They can open it up. They can say, oh, it's because you're kind of dumb and you missed that spot right there. And they can zip it and send it back. Or they can just tell you how to fix it. Or more realistically, okay, that's probably pretty realistic, but more optimally, you created a flow and you want to use it 37 different ways. But you've already built out this big chunk of logic in the middle. So you can either have other flows call that flow, or you can take the same flow and replicate it multiple times. Export and import. You can also look at your run history and your analytics. So your run history will say it ran this many times. It'll tell you the dates that it ran, and it'll tell you whether it was successful or failed. You can also delete it here too. So Microsoft gives us lots of places to do everything. The magic number has always been 3, especially in SharePoint. There's 3 places to get to everything. So from here, up here at the top, or under create. That's where we can create. We can start with templates right here. We can start with a connector. Or we can start from blank. And the first step you need to decide is this an automated flow, an instant flow, or a scheduled flow? And then flow will give you the first piece of it. So let's go with an instant flow because they're the easiest ones to do. See, now I zoomed and it doesn't want to zoom back. Refresh. All right, let's make an instant flow. Seriously? All right, we'll start with zooming out. There we go. Step 1, Add a name, please add a name. Don't let it generate the name. This is also brand new. Those 3 buttons at the top for automated instant flow or scheduled flow. And this screen right here, these are brand new. I'm assuming this is in public or general availability. Okay, had to be within the last month. Because before it would just take you straight to the canvas and it would throw a name up in there, which kind of breaks my whole joke about the most important part of flow. LSPUG flow button. All right, and we're going to trigger it. So that's cool. So we're triggering it from flow or we're triggering it from Power Apps. We want to trigger it from flow. This is not a Power Apps session. All right, manually trigger a flow. So it gave us the trigger. This is the trigger. So it's real easy to add a new step and start making actions, or we can click on the manually trigger a flow and we can add inputs. So this is where you can create those forms. So like the one that I did to collect people's names and contact information and whatnot. You can start with a pile of fields, and when you push the button on your phone, it brings up the form. So let's do name. Let's do a couple quick ones. Email address. Email is a good title for that one. All right, let's add a new step. And we're going to do an action. Let's do an email. So again, how do I know what I want to do? Because the first step I did was figure out what I want to do. So we're going to click a button, fill out a couple of fields, and then it's going to send me an email telling me that information. So we start with, let's search for email. Oh, I got lots of them. Which one do I do? So you'll notice this first one says send an email V3. I don't recognize that logo, but this one down here is Outlook. It's clearly an O for Outlook. I've seen that logo many times, and it's got a V2. So anytime you have an option, you notice this one is send an email, no version. This one's send an email V2. Use the newest one because it's got better stuff in it. The main difference between those two is V2, you can use HTML and you can pretty format it instead of just a pile of text looks like Notepad. So let's see, specify to, we're going to add this, we're going to make this go to me. And we'll look at that for in a moment, why it's being read like that. New contact. Here is the new contact. All right, now we want to include the information from that form into this email. How do we do that? I'm glad you asked. This little dynamic content thing right here. This is how we do that. So we talked earlier about the fact that data flows down the flow. So we have that form that push the button, and out of that we'll have 2 outputs, the name and the email. We're also going to have things like what time did it happen, and other fun stuff that's built into the back end of that. So there's all of these fields that apparently Flow figures out when you click a button. Name is the one we want for right here. Now you notice we don't have email on this list. Where is it? That's an excellent question. Where's my see more button? Should be a see more button right there. Yeah, maybe. All right. So normally there's a see more button right here that shows you the other fields that it didn't feel like were necessary to show you the first time. So we'll look at a different flow, see if we can find that button. Email, right there.
Sometimes if you expand it, I've seen flow can be, if you expand it, you might show up, but you don't have to save it or refresh it.
Oh, resuming.
No, well, no, like, when you don't see what you're expecting to see. So,
You're saying expand this field?
well, you already expanded the actual trigger,
Yeah.
but I have to do that a few times
Hmm.
in order to see it.
I would hate to think they took that button
It always
away.
happens when you're demoing. It's happened
Right.
to us.
Yeah, to be fair, I was in a hurry, so I forgot to do the sacrifice to the demo gods. Well, yeah. There's a search function here too. So if you can't find it, search for it.
Oh, content manager, literally all day.
Yeah.
I was like you could hover over with the force thing.
Right. And you see in the dynamic content, it's got the same logo. You got the little button logo like you have up here, telling you that that's where it's from. So, all right. Now, just like in SharePoint Designer, we have an awesome flow checker. It is amazingly underwhelming. It will, just like in SharePoint Designer, it will tell you if you have a missing field. It'll tell you if you have a bad email address in an email field. It will not tell you that you broke your logic. It will tell you if you have a action that's trying to refer to a trigger or a previous action that you deleted. It'll say, hey, you're trying to use data that you don't have. It will not tell you that you didn't do your if statement right, or your if loops right, or your switch cases are going to the wrong places and you created yourself an internal loop. It won't tell you that. So let's test this. So we've got save and test up here in the corner. Once it's done saving. Oh, and here's your title too, by the way, up here on the top left. Test. All right, so when you test, you can either perform the action right then, or if you've already tested it or you've already done the action, you can use previous data so that you're not creating 300 entries in your whatever, or you're not having to go out to Twitter and tweeting out to the entire world, I'm testing my flow again, testing my flow part 4, testing my flow number 312, because I can't figure it out. So use the same one over and over. All right, let's see if it'll work today. Okay, so we're signed in, we have permissions. I probably should have tested this before. It did this to me in Omaha too.
I might need to look at the admin stuff and see something needs to be updated.
Yeah, we're just gonna go and blame it on the admin.
It's usually the admin.
So typically speaking, what happens when you click that run, it pops up a little box right here. It says, do you want to do this? Yes, and that's your pushing the button. And then it shows you your run history. So let's go look at our run history, see. It could also be because I'm in an incognito,
Yeah,
so it's probably not letting it. So let's go out to my flows real quick. Yes, we've already saved. Find the LSPUG, and we're going to look at our run history. There are no runs because I'm in incognito mode probably.
Speaking of, you guys don't know about Google profiles. I use Google profiles for everything. It works great.
Right.
I have like 8 different logins, and the Google profiles works great for that.
Yes, Google profiles are amazing things. Multiple desktops, it's another great option.
Just asking to log into your Outlook.
No, I'm in incognito mode, but I'm on my work laptop, and we should probably not record the next few sentences. I'm on my work laptop, but I'm logged into my business demo account, And so I'm doing it in incognito mode so that it doesn't screw up my business, my work stuff, you know. All right, you can unpause the recording now.
Then we'll
So
try different security.
yeah, and I don't know what security they've put on here recently. They've,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, so let's look at the My Flows so we can see what the history looks like. Let's see if I ran this one. Of course not. Let's jump. Yeah, here, this one ran. We want to see run history. What?
One attendee, Sherry, shares that it's an organizational flow. You use system accounts, but if a person leaves, you don't lose it.
Yes, so there's a big debate about that. And it seems very well split down the middle. A lot of people say use a system account, and a lot of other people say just use yours and make sure you share it with somebody. And I would like to say the MVPs say this and Microsoft says it and everyone else doesn't, but the MVPs are split on it as well. So,
Would you say
yeah.
it more depends on the scenario than it does necessarily best practice?
Well,
If your IT department will give you a service account.
right, that too. Whether or not, what he said was, it depends on whether or not the IT department will give you a service account. But part of it is when you run the flow, like say it's it's in the back end of a SharePoint list or a Power Apps or something. When you run it, it's running as you, even though I published the flow and maybe I published the Power App. I might even be the creator of the Word or of the SharePoint list. But when you go in and do something in the SharePoint list that triggers the flow, it runs as you. It uses your Office credentials. It's looking for your, and this is where it gets questionable. This is where I haven't tested it, but this is where that service account question comes in. If that is dropping out to a Dropbox account, I'm not sure how they're getting your credentials at that point. So again, there's where the question comes in. When you're getting outside of the Office suite, you know, inside of Office, you're logged into Office 365 to do whatever it is. So it knows who you are. It can grab your credentials for all of that. The question becomes when you are reaching out to other places, how does that work? And I don't know the answer to that yet because it hasn't been a need for me. So, all right, we're at the end of time. So what questions, are there any other questions that I can attempt to answer?
Any in the room? Got a couple more online. To get this. A couple more here. So one is if you export a flow like you were showing, but it's connected to a SharePoint list, how will the person see it when they look at the exported flows? Like when you ask for help from someone, but they don't have the same SharePoint site as you, how does that look to them?
It's a good question. I assume that it would just, the connector would say it's not connected. And it won't have, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
That'd be a great question to post on SP Help or on the forum.
Yeah. And then how would I know if my company has a free version as opposed to a licensed version?
Of Flow? It's based on what kind of an Office license you have. So if you have an E3 or E1 or P1 or F1, I think is frontline worker, you can take whatever that license is and you can look on Microsoft and see.
There's a chart.
Right, there's charts. Or you can come to next month's or whenever it is, next Kansas City Power Ops and Flow user group and ask them. They'll have the answer. Or you come to SharePoint Saturday Kansas City on October 19th, which is free, and we'll feed you barbecue. And we have speakers from all over the country and apparently from out of country as well. So yeah, so reach out to Nate. He's got the information for that, or spsevents.org. And if you're not from the Kansas City general area, there are probably SPS events in your area as well. And
So April wanted to add to that export question. April, don't know.
okay.
So regarding the export, the connector will use your SharePoint connection. It'll prompt you to update. You'll have to reassociate the trigger to the relevant SharePoint site.
Okay, but if there's someone outside of your domain, they won't have.
No.
Okay. Hi, April. Oh, are you running video on this too?
Oh, no, just wait.
Just the screen. Okay, good.
April says hi. All right, any other questions from online or in-person attendees? Great. All right, well, thank you so much, Jonathan, for
Do you want me
sharing
to-
wisdom with us. I think that was really interesting, and I think there's so much new stuff coming out all the time, and I saw some new stuff today.
Yeah, those new buttons.
Yeah.
Those are, I don't know how new they are, but yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Do you want me to turn off my microphone?
Do you want to hang around, Jonathan? We'll be around for a few minutes. So please take some goodies with you.
Is it
Jonathan messed around with Flow Studio. John Lay's product.
Oh, John Lewis, I have not.
Yeah, he's got a free version. And it's nice. It'll show you like all your photos.